Hello everybody, my name is Liam Walken and today we will be converting this builder grade bathroom into a beautiful, highly functional wet room. So let's show you how we did that. Of course, we need to start with the demolition, but before even getting to this step, we did take multiple steps to ensure the best protection of our client's home, such as blocking off all air returns and floor registers, covering any floors leading to the space, ensuring all doors are closed, setting up a negative airspace, and of course, shutting off the water. And speaking of water, these days, most of our clients are working from home, so when we do these projects, we try to minimize the downtime that water is off so it doesn't affect them too much. So you'll see us making holes in the shower, the tub area, trying to get access to those pressurized water lines. That way we can cut them, cap them, and get the water back on. If you need to remove a drop-in tub like this style here, our best practice that we found is to get access to the plumbing, disconnect that all, and then break the silicone seal from the tub to the enclosure and lift it out of place. Once you have this tub out of place, you can start ripping everything apart from the inside where you have access to all that framing, and it just makes it a whole lot easier. We're going to take the multi-tool here and just score along the top of the tile and the backboard, taking them out in one piece, just a whole lot easier that way. And then we'll use a combination of the Sawzall and the 3-foot pry bar to get all of this framing and any leftover materials out of the space. At first, you may find this to be a little difficult, but the more you remove, the easier it gets as it all starts kind of falling apart. They did have this large fiberglass shower insert that was actually really well installed. It was a bit of a pain to remove, but once we were kind of able to cut it out from the framing, it will just kind of rock it out of position. And before taking it out of the house, we did actually just cut it in half to make it easier. We don't want to risk damaging any of the client's walls or doorways upon demo or the entire renovation process because we are here to improve the house after all, not make it worse. These interior walls did have some insulation, I assume to help with sound transfer, but we will be removing that and replacing it with a much better product later on, which you will see. In our area, at least for the time period of homes that we're typically working on, the go-to method of prior installs was a lath stapled to the plywood subfloor and then tiled over top. And this is pretty rough to remove sometimes. It depends how many staples the previous guys had put in. This one wasn't too bad, but our go-to method here, again, just using that 3-foot pry bar, kind of go a couple rows at a time, disconnecting that lath from the fasteners to the subfloor and ripping it out in chunks. This is extremely labor intensive, but at least we get the sense of accomplishment afterwards and maybe a gold one or two. There will be quite a few changes going on with this wall, such as how far that tile extends, the mechanical items within the wall, such as various new electrical items, and the doorway itself will be expanding. So we're just going to go ahead and remove all the drywall here so we can get access for all of that stuff. With all of that though, we can finally start working on our actual wet room, and this here being the shower portion of that space. We're simply taking a skill saw set to the depth of the subfloor and a Sawzall for any of the areas by the existing bottom plates or the walls where the skill saw can't get into. And we're just going to make quite a few rips here in order to remove all of this subfloor. And this is for a couple different reasons. First off, we need to be able to access the plumbing to make changes for the new proposed layout. And two, we need to build a curbless design. I will provide a link to a couple different videos I have on the curbless subject if you want to learn more about that, but essentially we just need to make sure that we have an area that will fit our shower pan, because for a shower pan to work, it needs slope, which means the perimeter of it will be higher, in our case, 1.25 inches high. So we want to reduce any buildup in the bathroom floor, hence recessing the subfloor in the shower area. Now, for those of you unaware, a wet room is essentially just a self-contained space in which everything in it can get wet. Shocker, I know. Now, it doesn't have to be just a tub and a shower. It could be the whole bathroom if you wanted it to be, but there are pros and cons to making our wet room certain sizes, and I can talk about that more in a later video. But for this project specifically, we'll be having the tub on the left side and the shower area on the right side of our self-contained space, and of course with the shower area we'll need slope so that the water from the shower can make its way to the drain. Now when we think about slope with a pan like this that has a center drain, we're going to have 4 different planes of slope, all leading to that center drain. This is important to note because later on the video, you'll be seeing us using large format tile, in which the tiles cover multiple planes. So we'll have to use a special sort of cut to allow those larger tiles to conform to the different planes. Now, I do also want to take note that there was another way in which this project or any wet room could have been completed, and that would have been making use of a linear drain. This has the added benefit of making it so that our slope only has one plane that all runs towards that wall, and we wouldn't need to make use of an envelope cut for our tiles. Hypothetically, this would also allow you to not have a fixed drain for your tub so that you could remove it or shift it around in the room for any cleaning reasons. One final thing you may also consider then is a ceiling or wall mounted tub filler with a separate valve in the wall. This way, instead of say a floor mounted tub filler, you would have no perforations through your floor's waterproofing system. It would just be a slight upgrade. But with all of that being said, all of these things come at substantial price increases for an already expensive project. So for the project that you'll be seeing in this video, the layout that we've gone with, at least in my opinion, is a fantastic balance of cost and functionality. Anyways, back to the project. So what we're doing now that we've gone over everything is just recessing the area for that shower pan that we talked about. The subfloor in this project here is 5/8 inch thick, although if you're in the US, you're more likely to see 3/4 inch, but we're just gonna take some 2x4s, use a combination of construction adhesive and framing nails, and set them at a depth of 5/8 inch below the top of our joist there. That way, later on, we can take some 5/8 plywood, cut it to size, and then the top of that plywood will be flush with the top of the existing joists. Hence, we're able to take our shower pan that's 1.25 inches thick on the perimeters and recess it down 5/8 of an inch, and that's going to cut back how much we have to raise the rest of the floors. The whole purpose behind that logic is that we don't want the height difference between the bathroom floor and the hallway floor outside of the bathroom to be too different. I do also want to note that at this time, we took the opportunity to relocate our drains so that we could have a center drain for that shower space and then a drain associated with where the tub is going to go at a 45-degree angle in that left corner. And then we also converted the existing copper lines to PEX type A, ran a hot and cold line both to our tub filler as well as to where our new shower valve will be in that wall there. With all of our 2x4s now sistered to the joist though, we can then cut the plywood to size. We do a test fit, which we just drop it into the location, make sure it fits, and then once again use a combination of construction adhesive and this time flooring screws to secure it all into place. Again, I'll link a video for more details on this topic. With every project that we do for showers, we like to put a nice niche in here. So for this one, we'll be having a 28-inch wide horizontal niche, so it'll be 12 inches tall. So we're just going to adjust the framing to be able to allow for that. So the width of our framing here, I think we do about 31 inches in width. And then for the height, we're going to actually have it maybe closer to 30 inches in height, despite only having a 12-inch high niche. That way, once we board everything up, tile our first wall, we'll have a lot of flexibility on the height of the niche to make sure that it corresponds to a grout line. I also want to make a note that the wall we're currently working on is non-load bearing, hence why we're able to frame it with the method that you're seeing. The clients also wanted a corner bench, so no problem. I think we put this one at about 18 inches in height, and the front face of that triangle, that nice right angle triangle, yeah, I know shapes, is I think around 24 inches. So just a nice little corner bench that will really improve the functionality of this space a whole lot. As a part of this wet room, we will be doing a tiled ceiling, but with 24 by 24 inch porcelain tiles. Those have quite a bit of weight to them, so we can't just put these tiles on regular drywall. You maybe could, and honestly, I think it would probably be fine, but I know that I'm not taking that risk. So instead, we're gonna do a little bit work to prep the ceiling for our large heavy tiles and have all of that reassurance that I need to know it's gonna last forever. In order to do this, the first thing I did is I went into the attic and removed all the blown-in insulation from above the space off to the side. We then removed the drywall ceiling and the resilient channel as well, repaired the vapor barrier, and then installed these new 1x6 boards. That way we'd have something nice to bite into for our new backer board and have a lot more support everywhere as well. It also allowed us to ensure that we had a perfectly flat space, as that's going to be important for achieving 100% coverage as we're tiling. The clients wanted a ceiling mounted rain head, but there's an attic above us. So we can't just run our pipe up through there all willy-nilly because it could potentially freeze in the winter. So instead we're going to install that drop here on a piece of blocking below the vapor barrier. That way it gets the climate controlled temperatures from the bathroom without the freezing temperatures from above. We're going to take a PEX type A expansion fitting method here to make all of our connections, and we're just going to run that pipe right through that top plate under the vapor barrier and then connect it to the drop here. here, and the other end will be connected to that mixing valve there. If you're just a DIYer, I'd just recommend PEX Type B with the O-ring crimp style fittings. The expansion tool here is quite expensive, but for how much of this stuff we do, it's well worth it for us. On the left-hand side, there'll be a separate handheld with a sort of an adjustable bar, so we have some blocking above for that as well. And then, of course, we got to connect the supply lines, so the hot and cold line getting connected into the valve as well. For the ceiling, we are using Weedy board here. I didn't want to use drywall because the risk of that paper delaminating from the gypsum, and then Curdy board because of the membrane delaminating from the foam board. So instead, Weedy seemed like the perfect option. Unlike cement board, it's quite a bit lighter, and we do have these nice washers and these specialized screws to really get it tight up onto that framing and have absolutely no worries that this will ever be going anywhere. Back to the subfloors. As mentioned earlier, our shower pan is 1.25 inches thick along the perimeter. We recessed that area by 1.25 inches, and that still leaves us with 5/8 to build up the floor to be at the same height. So here we're installing 3/8 inch plywood. We're just going to use construction adhesive and crown staples absolutely everywhere to make sure it's well adhered to the existing subfloor. And then once that's all installed everywhere with an expansion gap, of course, too, between boards and between walls, we can then cover that up with Ditra Heat Peel and Stick. This product's going to do quite a few things for us. The first being the clients wanted a heated bathroom floor, and this mat here just accepts a heating cable into the grooves so that we can run it everywhere throughout the space and give them nice heated floors. The second thing is that it's an uncoupling membrane. If you were to tile directly to plywood, let's say, well, plywood expands and contracts quite heavily. Tile over time bonded to that would start to break its bond and crack. This product here allows your house to move however it may want, and your tile won't crack over time, which is obviously very important. On top of all of that, this is also waterproof. So as we don't have a traditional curb to contain the water, we want to make sure that not only the shower area is waterproof, but the whole wet room is waterproof. And the area just a foot or two outside of the wet room is also waterproof. So we can just extend our waterproofing over to this mat and have that all taken care of. This is the peel and stick version, making for a very easy installation. We simply just cut it to size, peel off the plastic on the back, and stick it into place. You do need a very clean subfloor to do this. If you don't have one that's new like ours is, you would want to prime it first, but again, we have a new subfloor here, so we didn't have to do that step. The final step before boarding up all the walls is insulating. So this is all interior, but to help with sound transfer, we're going to be installing this Rockwool Safe and Sound into all of the cavities, and that's going to help a great deal. This stuff is incredibly itchy though, hence why we're all suited up. And also at this time, I did go back up into the attic and re-insulate the area above the ceiling here with that same blown in insulation. Moving on to the waterproofing, and if you're familiar with this channel, you have seen this product a whole lot. This is Curdy board, and it's just a 1/2 inch waterproof board. So at the top layer of it, that orange surface there is completely waterproof. So we're just going to install it to the wall using the dedicated washers and screws to fasten it to each stud, every foot or so going up those studs. And what I really love about this product is how easy it is to work with. It's extremely easy to cut. Just take a knife, just like you would drywall, score it, snap it, or really any tool, because it is just a foam board. And with that, of course, when you have a project like this that involves so many different sheets, the ability to take all of these different pieces of the board and just move them up to the project space in one go is just so nice. You couldn't do that with something like drywall, or definitely not cement board. The downside being its price, but good materials cost money. That's just all there is to it. This part felt very strange to us both, just 2 sheets of drywall in this entire bathroom. That's just not the norm, but hey, I wasn't going to complain. That was nice for sure. Helps that we're putting up so much tile, so half of this bathroom almost is all tile, which I love to see. But yeah, this was just kind of strange for us. If you're still watching the video, if you could just maybe take a second, just hit that like button or even subscribe, I would really, really appreciate it. And even if you don't, I still appreciate the fact that you're here watching the video. Thank you. This is that heating cable I'd mentioned earlier for the heated floors, and we're just going to run it throughout the bathroom floor here. You could, of course, put this in a shower or a wet room. However, you would just need a separate zone for that as per Schluter's recommendations. But in this project, we're just doing the general area that you're seeing now and just keeping that cable away from any floor registers, plumbing, walls, all that stuff has guidelines. The OS&B Island Tub Drain, very nice product. I like this one a lot. I'll provide a link to a video on how to install freestanding tubs if you're interested in learning more, but really it just connects to that P-trap below. It has a couple of O-rings in it, and then your tub drain just kind of slides right into it, and it's a really easy install. I like this product. We did end up extending the Weedy board a little past the ceiling that will actually get tile. So we're just taking some 5 fuse here, mudding it on over that seam, and Sebastian will do a few more coats later on to make that completely feathered out and beautiful. Moving on to the waterproofing, and this is Schluter's All Set Thin Set, which is a fantastic product, but again, a little bit pricey. But when it comes to waterproofing, you know, you don't want to take any chances. So mix that up on the little bit of like the runnier side as per their guidelines for how much water to add to the mix. We just go with the maximum amount of water that they recommend to get that nice consistency, and then using the Curdy trowel and directional troweling, so getting all that thin set running in the same direction, cutting the Curdy membrane, the banding there, to the size with just a pair of scissors, and then getting it over that thin set and collapsing those ridges using a couple of dull drywall knives. So when we're doing this, we're just gonna put the banding over all that thin set, take the knives and just collapse those ridges down, getting all the air out from beneath. We don't want to start removing all of the thin set because that's what's making the bond. So don't hurt yourself trying to really get all that stuff out of there. We just want to collapse those ridges, get the air out, and have a nice tight bond with it. I did pre-cut all of these pieces and the squares too. The squares going over all of those washers, and then longer pieces, the banding over any of the seams where the boards meet or any corners, or where the pan meets the Ditra heat on the floor, or Ditra heat meets Ditra heat. There's a lot of this stuff going on. Yeah, it's a big space, big waterproof space, so a whole lot of this stuff going in. For the pan, I'm just going to kind of wet that subfloor so that it doesn't pull all the moisture out of the thin set. Although again, we are on the runnier side with our thin set, so it's not really a big concern for me. And then I'm going to use a 1/4 inch square notch trowel, and again using that directional troweling to get all that thin set in the same direction. And at this time, I'm also going to glue in my drain to the P-trap below. Once I have all the thin set covering the space, I can then take the pan, which I also did a little dry fit earlier, so I cut it to size where that corner is out of position there with the bench, did a dry fit, took it back out, got my thin set in, and then just pushed it down. Because this pan is so big, it did come in 2 separate pieces, which is kind of funny. I don't think we've worked with a pan this size before, but with that in position, we can tamp it down once again, trying to get all the air out from underneath, and then waterproof every single seam. This is the part that's really important. When showers fail, they almost always are going to fail at the pan, or if you have a curb shower, at the curb. So you just want to make sure you're doing a really good job with this step. As far as the tub drain goes here, although I don't really ever foresee any water entering this area, but we're going to waterproof it anyways. We want to use Curdy Fix around that metal of the tub drain itself, and then thin set where it's over the Ditra heat. Make sure that's all tightly bonded. And then for the tub filler in that corner back there, we're going to use more of that Curdy Fix when the actual installation comes for the tub filler. So we'll show you more of that later. And then any excess thin set, we don't want to throw away. I'm just going to take it and trowel it into the combs of the Ditra heat so that we're not wasting it. And then when it comes time to tiling, we don't have to mix as much thin set. Now time to tile the floor, and this is my least favorite part. I really don't like tiling floors, but it has to be done. So when it comes to an envelope cut like the one you're seeing now with those diagonal relief cuts from the drain to the corners of the shower area, we do dry fit these first, as they take a good bit of time. Eventually I'll come out with a full video on this because I know there's a lot more interest in this these days. Everyone wants less grout lines, which is totally understandable, so stay tuned for that. But pretty much we just take the tiles, we mark the location of where those corners will be and where the drain is, add in the relief cuts, and then we make sure our dry fit's all good, and then we go back and tile it to place. As far as how we tile this, we're using that 1/2 inch square notch trowel, the directional troweling, back buttering every single piece, which is extremely important, and then we're using 1/16 grout lines and with the wedge style system, so that's going to go ahead and reduce any lippage between tiles. Any exposed cuts, like where you'd have those diagonal cuts, we're going to take a polishing pad on the grinder with a 200 grit pad just to get rid of any sharp edges from the wet saw, and then we can just put everything into place, collapse all the ridges as we're installing it, and it's going to turn out beautiful. As far as the tile type used, you just don't really want to be using a glossy tile in a wet space, but these large format tiles have more than enough grip to them as long as you're getting like a honed or a matte tile, something with a decent amount of grip to it. One other big tip I have is clean as you go. So with your grout lines, you might have thin set squeezing through. It helps to just have a toothbrush as you're doing this to clean out the wet thin set as you're working your way through this. But the next day, the tile's now safe to walk on. We can go ahead, remove all of those wedges, and start cleaning out any of the thin set that we didn't get as we were tiling. So just taking a knife, kind of just chipping out that thin set. And you just want to be careful. You don't want to extend your knife too deep and pierce the waterproofing membrane or the heating cables. So just getting enough of that thin set out that we can later on get some grout in there. Then we'll cover up our floors with a paper and some blue painter's tape. That way they're protected for the rest of the renovation. For the walls here, we're using another 24-inch by 24-inch tile, this time in a glossy format though. And when it comes to this tile size, it's not actually 24 inches, so we have to start with a half tile. If we were to start with a full tile and just work our way up, we would eventually have a small sliver cut at the top, as these are 8-foot ceilings. So instead, we cut our first row in about half, and we use a laser level to do that to ensure that our first row is perfectly level. A really easy way to mark your tiles to be cut for that first row is you take your laser level, you go and you hold your tile up against the wall, flip it over so that the back side of the tile is now facing that laser line. Make a little pencil mark on each end of the tile where that laser cuts it in half. Flip your tile back over, transfer those pencil lines to the front of the tile, cut your tile, and then that way you can flip it back over for install and you put that cut edge of the tile towards the floor, and it just works out beautifully that way. For the niche here, I like these to be at around 4 feet from the floor. It's just a nice comfortable height that I found works. However, it's going to be really dictated by the grout lines. So with that left wall done, we can shine that laser through the grout line and then cut out our niche that way that the grout line intersects the top of the niche in this case, and it's going to look really clean that way. So I take a multi-tool, cut out the shape of our prefab 28-inch niche, and then I can put a couple pieces of blocking in there, secure it all using the fasteners, and then waterproof along all of the edges here. And shooting a laser line through that first row of tiles on the left there. That way this wall can be perfect with it. We want everything to be level. As we work our way up, any imperfections will grow, so we don't want that. And when we're installing walls, typically with this size of tile, we'll actually back butter the walls and trowel out the back of the tiles instead. We just found it to be a little bit more clean, although you'll see us periodically shift, and it just kind of depends on the exact tile, I suppose. Something else we do make a lot of use of are those tiny little red wedges that you can just barely make out in certain grout lines, and especially at the very first row tile against the floor there. Those are perfect for making the micro adjustments you need to get everything to be perfectly level. And that's a really important tip here, because again, if your first row is off by say 64, well, as you go up that wall, that's going to just continue to grow, and you're going to be fighting it the whole way. So the more perfect you can get your base, your foundation, the whole process is just going to be a lot easier. When we get to tiling above the niche here, I'm just going to make use of a couple clamps and reverse them. Many clamps, you'll find that you're able to just kind of take the handle off and flip it over. And that's a really nice and easy way for securing these tiles as that thin set cures so that they don't sag in any way. I do also want to make note that with that rightmost column of tiles, the one that will kind of end our tiled wall or begin it, depending on your perspective, we do batch cut those tiles because this is a perfectly level and stacked kind of tile layout we're going for here. So if we're doing a wall like this, we'll take our measurement for what we want the wall to end at, and we'll just cut our tiles. In this case, we know we're going to have 5 rows of tiles, so we'll cut 5 tiles all to be the exact same size, and that way they're just ready to go when we're installing them. It's going to speed up the process and just make it a little bit easier. To cap off this last row of tile as well, we'll be using eventually a 1/2-inch tile profile in chrome, and we don't insert it just yet, and the reason being is I've just kind of found it easier to insert it once the whole wall is done. So once the wall is completed, we'll sometimes just push in a little more thin set behind those tiles there if needed to make sure we have a fresh bond for that profile. We'll cut the profile to the height here and then just slide it in behind it all, and it's just a really easy way to do that. tiling the niche here, and I should have done that back tile first. It just makes it a little bit easier. Not sure why I didn't here, but anyways, with that bottom row, of course, slight pitch to it so that any water inside will find its way out and into the drain. And to finish off the front of this niche, using more of those tile profiles, this time giving them little miters. That way they just transition into each other perfectly. It's just a clean look. And for the installation of any of these tiles, I don't actually trowel them out. Instead, I use larger globs of thin set, and I like to just really squeeze them in. You'll see all the thin set coming out, so I know I have full coverage. But the reason behind that is it's just easier to manipulate the tiles as I need to get a perfectly clean and flush finish here. And again, those little red wedges really useful for making everything perfect. The top of the bench here getting a nice piece of quartz, which is a really good match with the tiles actually. And an important step for this here, just like with that niche and really any tile in the shower that's going to be flat like this, we want a pitch to it towards the drain. So you can see using that little level there to make sure that I have enough of that pitch. And if I didn't, I could always just get some extra thin set on that back corner of it and try to just have a slight slope to it. And then finishing off the front of it as well. And one small change I would make if I did this again is I just have that middle grout line there actually intersect with the envelope cut diagonal grout line. It just would have been a slightly cleaner finish. Finally, you can start priming everything, and this is, of course, Sherwin-Williams Cover Max, our go-to primer. So Sebastian's just going to roll that on everywhere, cut in any of the corners, and then once that has had full time to cure, give it a light sand, and then move on to the ceilings with Sherwin-Williams Premium Ceiling Paint. Similar process, rolling it on, cutting in the corners. Now it's time for grout, and you might be a little confused because what is this egg yolk that I'm making here? But this is just an epoxy based grout. So this is the mini unit of Spectralock Pro by Laticrete in the color Silver Shadow. And we made the switch off of cement based grouts because we just found they weren't holding up very well. It sucks to install like a high-end bathroom like the one you're seeing here and then put in a grout that's going to be soaking up all sorts of soap scum, water, mildew, and just getting gross over the years. So if there's a better alternative, which there is, then we want to use it. And this epoxy grout does suck to install if I'm being honest, but realistically it's only a couple hours of suffering, and that ensures that the client's going to have years and years of a vastly superior product. This stuff is able to move in a way that cement-based grout can't, less porous, and of course it's not going to stain or absorb anything in the way that cement-based grouts will. So as you can see, it's a lot of work here. We had to do a couple washes. I'd be really careful because the haze is a lot tougher to get rid of than a cement haze, but with the right amount of labor and care, it is the way to go. For any of the inside corners here, I'm just using a color match silicone. So this is Latisil, again in that Silver Shadow color. I'm just gonna apply nice thick beads into all of the corners, spray it with some soapy water, and then I take a popsicle stick, and then that way I can get a nice shape to it, scrape off all the excess, and get a really clean bead in all of those corners. I do use tape in some spots to just really ensure I get a clean finish. And as you can see, nice thick beads. We put a lot in there and take a lot off, and then really shape it up. You can even get your finger in there a little, so long as you have some soapy water on your finger, that way it won't stick to it. You can shape everything up the way you need to. The client supplied this paint, which is Moonshine by Benjamin Moore, and also a really good paint. We are Sherwin guys, but Benjamin Moore has some tremendous paint as well. We're more than happy to use this for this bathroom here. We could then lift up all of our floor coverings and grout the floor, and if there were ever a case in which you would want to use an epoxy grout, it would definitely be a bathroom floor, or more specifically a shower floor. I think with the epoxy grout, for us, we're just going to be using it everywhere. However, if you are just a DIYer wanting to do your own bathroom, at the very least, I would strongly urge you to use an epoxy grout for the shower floor at the very minimum. I realize this video is primarily on the wet room, but there is a whole other half to this bathroom, and we had this beautiful 7-foot vanity that we got installed, and the clients actually did the wallpaper themselves. So that's what you saw in the back there, which is a really nice touch. I love accent pieces, whether it's wallpaper, trim, tile, any of the sorts. I love to see it. And then just like with the shower, I'm going to use a silicone here for the inside corners and where that backsplash meets the wallpaper as well. finally moving on to tiling the ceiling, and ideally this would have been done a little earlier on in the project before we had grouted and taken up all the floor coverings, so we did have to put some more coverings back down. But the reason behind that was just I gave the clients the wrong quantity of tile that they needed, as I just completely forgot to include the measurements for the ceiling tile, which is obviously my bad. However, it didn't cause too bad of a delay because we were able to just continue on with the project, fortunately. But as far as the installation goes, we're just going to back butter that ceiling and then trowel out the tiles here using a 1/2 inch square notch trowel. We want to get full coverage. It's very important because these are big tiles going on a ceiling. So the most important thing with this though actually is the thin set that we're using. This is Custom Building Products Pro Light, which is a very strong non-sag thin set, and that's what's going to allow these tiles to adhere to the ceiling and cure despite gravity wanting to pull them down. We're still able to use the wedge style system to make sure we have no lippage on these tiles, and we want to just have all the grout lines line up. And this is a little tricky because we do have 3 walls now that aren't necessarily perfectly square with each other, so we just had to make use of that laser where we could get all of our measurements. And once we had that first row done, the process did become quite a bit easier, but there was still a lot of finesse involved trying to get this all to work. We did end up putting 4 pot lights in this space, 2 on either side of the rain head there, and then another 2, one centered in the space and one kind of over that tub area. So for the 2 with the rain head positioning, those we did drill out prior to installing the tile, but the other 2, as they did intersect 4 different tiles, we chose to drill them out after everything had cured, as it was just going to be easier that way. And so that's why you'll notice that there's only 2 holes for pot lights at the time of installation. It's not too often that we do tile ceilings. In fact, I think this is only my 3rd time tiling a ceiling. And the reason being for that is it's just an additional cost that most people don't really care for, as it's not necessary, right? For what we do here, we're using high-end products, especially for the ceiling, right? We have the high-end premium ceiling paint by Sherwin-Williams, typically in our showers, with good ventilation. We're not concerned about mildew or any of that forming. However, especially in a space like this where we have a nice big wet room, it's a really nice extra to have in your shower. If you want to spend the extra money on a tiled ceiling, I do think there's a lot of benefits to it. If it isn't already obvious, if you're going to be doing a project like this one, a laser level is a very important tool to have. And speaking of tools, if you're interested in what we use, I do have my Amazon store page linked in the description, so you can check that out if you're interested. But the laser here, you can see we just use that to set up that tile profile so that it perfectly in line with the 2 existing tile profiles. That way we can then measure all these last row of tiles to size, put them up, and have that nice straight line ending off the tile for this wet room. As mentioned, to drill out the pot lights here, this is just a 4-inch diamond hole bit on the grinder, and it makes short work of these holes, although obviously we want to have our respirators on and try to use a vacuum to the best of our ability here to reduce the amount of dust in this space. But we can just drill out the hole for the pot lights here, and it's just a little easier this way. I mean, you know, you got to be careful, because if you were to slip at this point, those tiles are already installed and that's not going to be a fun repair. But the right amount of caution, I think this was the right move to drill them out after. The pot lights themselves are just 4-inch LED pot lights set at the color temperature 4000K for this space here. They do have the vapor tight seal around them, so that way when you put the pot lights into place, there's sort of that nice gasket that will ensure that no moisture can leave the space. Finally, we can get the last couple fixtures into place. So for the tub filler here, we're just going to connect the water lines, seat this thing into position. We can mark the holes, drill through the porcelain tile, and then we just want to fill any of those holes, and especially that border there. So where the porcelain tile meets the Ditra heat that's waterproof below, we're just going to fill all of that up with silicone. Use a whole lot of it here to ensure it's tight, and then we can install the rest of this fixture. There is also a gasket between the bottom of the plate there and the porcelain tile as well. So again, an ideal scenario is maybe a wall mounted filler or a ceiling mounted filler, but we're able to make the floor mounted filler work in this case. Again, I have a video on this subject if you want to learn more, but we can just drop the tub into the island tub drain there, and that's pretty much it for install. We did also apply a complete clear silicone bead around the base of this tub, so the whole way around it, just to ensure that that's also not going to have any water getting beneath it. And that's pretty much it for the tub install. And there we have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, maybe just hit that like button quickly or subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. I would greatly appreciate it. If you are located within the Mississauga or surrounding areas, my contact information will be down below. You can submit a form on the website, and maybe we can work together one day. I do apologize for not getting footage of the glass install. That was done by my subcontractor Bola Glass, who did a tremendous job as always. I'll have their link in the description below as well if you're interested. And I had a lot of fun with this one. I really like wet rooms as a concept. I think for a lot of spaces they just make sense. So for any of you watching, maybe consider this for your project, because in some cases I think they're just the better route to take. And I will be sharing my prices here, and just keep in mind as I do that they are my prices only. These do not dictate the prices of contractors in your area or even in my area. They are only my prices. I share these to try and add a little transparency to a space where there isn't a ton of it, and as a result I always get a ton of comments, people telling me I'm way too cheap or I'm too expensive. And guys, just know I am happy with these numbers, and so are my clients, and that's all that matters. Anyways, that is it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you have a beautiful day.